Hello and welcome to MiHUB Monday, October the 24th, 2022. We will begin our webinar in approximately 4 minutes. Thank you for joining us today. Hello and welcome to MiHUB Monday for October the 24th, 2022. And today we're going to be talking about federal contracting opportunities. My name is Scott Phillips, and I'm the host of MiHUB Mondays and the director of the MBDA Advanced Manufacturing Center here in Baltimore. We're excited about today's conversation, and we're really excited about our guest. So before I get into that, just want to give you some background. The Manufacturing Innovation Hub Cooperative is an affiliate of the MBDA Advanced Manufacturing Center here in Baltimore. It is a democratically controlled, owned, and operated organization focused on advancing minority manufacturers and providing an opportunity for minority manufacturers to participate as members to grow their companies collectively. We often say, if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And that's what the MiHUB Cooperative is all about. We'll have more information about the MiHUB Cooperative toward the end and letting you know how to connect with MiHUB and our colleagues, particularly the President and Chief Operating Officer, Executive Officer of MiHUB is Cynthia Rumpf-Gooding, one of our local manufacturers here in the Baltimore area. And the person who we have really kind of coordinating the efforts with MiHUB is Mark Lawrence, who's a consultant who operates a firm called Incubate. So that's the background on why we do this and why we're here. But I wanted to kind of get right into our topic today, which is government contracting and government opportunities. And so today we have one of our clients who will highlight first, Mr. Japhus Doswell from Juxtopia. We also have Ms. Crystal Broomfield from the General Service Administration. And Crystal I've known for a very long time, has been an advocate for minority business in her role with AMAC and now in GSA. And Mr. Christopher Hall, who is representing the Defense Logistics Agency. So how do you get there, right? And a good example of how you begin working with government, and particularly with the Department of Defense, is Japhus Doswell. Dr. Japhus Doswell is the CEO of Juxtopia and the JUICE Network. And over a number of years, Japhus has been extremely successful in securing research and development dollars, specifically along the lines of AI, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality. And so I'd like to bring Japhus in to share a little bit more about what he is doing in that field and his experience in working with government and securing government contracts. Japhus, welcome. You've been a part of the MBDA network for probably about 5 years now. So I'd like you to share your experience and provide some advice and counsel while you're doing it.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me, Scott. MiHUB is a wonderful resource, so thank you, and I'm honored to be a member of such a great resource. So to answer your questions, how to get started in this space on DoD contracting, especially as a minority high-tech entrepreneur. Juxtopia started with an STTR specifically. We worked with Dr. Brian Blake, who's now, he went the academic route. He's a university professor at Georgia State University. But at that time, he was chair of computer science at Georgetown University. And we came up with this kind of crazy idea back in 2005 to create an artificial intelligence-enabled augmented reality system, vertically agnostic, to help human beings perform hands-on activities across vertical markets, ranging from military medicine to trauma medicine and construction, for example. Phase 1 secured, phase 2 secured, developed, prototype to product, and then commercialized through a phase 3 mechanism using the Department of Defense Rapid Innovation Fund, which required the technology to be at a certain level, at tactical readiness level 6. And I'm sure, Scott, you can talk about that and what that means to the audience. And that was a 24-month effort, and it allowed us to get real experience on working with the Department of Defense, understanding their requirements, understanding what the deliverables are, how to deliver, how to set up the DCAA compliant accounting and timesheet reporting. That's the very important administrative activities, as well as delivering the final product to serve the needs for military medical personnel across the United States. So in summary, starting off with the STTR, which is an R&D effort, culminated in a commercialization endeavor that really jump-started Juxtopia into what we do today.
So Japhus, talk about that a little bit, because you hit on something I think it's important. Why is the STTR and SBIR program such a critical program for getting products into government? Talk about what it means from a procurement perspective once you've reached the commercialization stage.
The SBIR program is a fantastic program for seed R&D funding. I mean, we're talking about numbers ranging from $250,000 on a 6-month effort, non-debt, non-diluted. The SBIR program, the company must submit. So for an SBIR and STTR, companies are really the prime. And these companies, like yours, can subcontract to many of the colleges and universities. including but not limited to HBCUs and minority serving institutions. The phase two, so I talked about the phase one, on average, it's about $250,000 direct cost for developing a prototype and really developing the technical and feasibility for this type of proposed intervention. Phase twos can go up to about $3 million, depending on the agency. And that is funding, again, non-debt, non-diluted, to help transition that prototype into a commercial product. Now, phase three is your procurement. So now you have a product, you need to scale it. Got to have a vehicle, maybe it's an OASIS, GSA schedule. And that's when the procurement is very important to, let's say for ours, our procurement arm was PEO Stride in Orlando, Florida. So that's how we market it. Or Defense Logistics Agency, that is like sells to all the military branches. I consider, and for the DLA rep in the room, I'm sorry I'm making this analogy, it's like the Walmart for DOD. They're selling everything to across the branches, but it's the warehouse where you can get the equipment for the warfighter. So that phase two provides that early validation to the Department of Defense, for example, so it can set the companies up for procurement across the different federal government, through the DOD, for this example, through a vehicle. Also, I want to note, which is often not understood, is that once you get an SBIR phase one, and you have a little bit of money to do some R&D, the law states that an SBIR phase one awardee is eligible for sole source across any federal government agency at any time, as long as the innovation is innovative, without ceiling. Very similar to what is recent introduction into DOD called an OTA, or the Transaction Authority, which is a $500 million ceiling, but a sole source doesn't have one. So that's another procurement type of methodology that one could utilize to scale up pretty fast from SBIR to about $50 million, like an IDIQ.
That's where I wanted you to get to. So I wanted people to really understand that once you go through this SBIR process and you are successful, you have an advantage, a competitive advantage, in that you have the ability to have an opportunity sole sourced to you without a ceiling. So thank you for addressing that one, Japhus. Talk to us, Japhus, about what you see for the future of Juxtopia.
Oh, that's a great question. I think this is the question that I like very much. Juxtopia is a biomedical and information technology company, first established as one in Baltimore, Maryland, where we're headquartered. We're focused on wearable computers for improving human performance. And we've been doing artificial intelligence since my PhD in computer science at George Mason University in 2005. So our future in Juxtopia is to reinforce our mission, which is improving human performance. And our plans for the future is to scale our mixed reality. That's the technical term, not the Zuckerberg term of metaverse, but the technical term is mixed reality. So we can scale our artificial intelligence enabled mixed reality systems. So we deliver an improving human performance interface to improve human performance across a variety of industries, ranging from military, medical personnel, training trauma docs at University of Chicago or shock trauma, to helping and improve the performance of nurses and construction workers that build the infrastructure for today and tomorrow. Lastly, we're working with Tuskegee University right now on a contract, hopefully crossing our fingers, it gets awarded to support the Artemis mission with our artificial intelligence enabled augmented reality head mount displays, which gets us into a $1 trillion space market. Very, very huge marketplace where underrepresented minorities often do not operate. And so, but both on Earth and to the moon, which is the Artemis missions, and beyond, we see that Juxtopia can continually and will continue to improve human performance so that we can achieve our mission. More importantly, every product that we deliver and every R&D award that we secure, we make a point and a conscientious effort to include underserved and disadvantaged populations on our engineering team, so that the STEM proficiency can be improved for cultures underserved and disadvantaged in this field, and providing workforce opportunities. So,
Japhus, you're doing some really wonderful things. It's very focused, right? Impactful. One of the questions that I have for you, and it really kind of dovetails into the purpose of MiHUB. You've built some capacity to do proposal development. And in the federal space, that seems to be a critical component of being successful with securing federal contracts. Can you talk about that a little and give any advice, if you will, around proposal writing, proposal development, and building that skill set within an organization?
Yes. That's a great question, and I'm pausing because I want to answer this in the effective way. Like, what's the so Juxtopia has a proposal writing arm. It's really under our nonprofit organization, the Juxtopia Group. The program is called the Juxtopia Urban Innovation and Cooperative Entrepreneurship Network. I think Scott, you've shared a link with the audience, and that network was created to support high-tech, high-growth minority companies, secure SBIRs and STTRs from across the federal government agency, and to facilitate technology transfer from the walls of HBCUs, minority serving institutions, to minority companies. In the proposal development space, we deliver, my team, we write the entire proposals because it is burdensome if one hasn't done it before, especially like a DoD or NIH, SBIR, STTR, or across any of the federal government agencies. The trick that but the technique that I've learned over the years of writing and failing many, many times before getting awards is persistence, tenacity, fortitude, and discipline. The discipline of not waiting before the last hour to submit, because mistakes often happen, giving 2 weeks before the submission deadline, preparing the proposal for submission, and then also having a timeline of when those proposals should be submitted. And also, more importantly, having a great team to assist with the proposal writing process. Within the JUICE network, we have created a discipline of writing the proposals, from NIH to DoD to USDA to EPA, Department of Homeland Security, so forth and so on, so that we have a standard operating procedure, if you will, to get these proposals out. And we have an award rate for some agencies of about 46%.
That's excellent. Wow. So Japhus, I'm going to bring you back in a moment, but this is a good segue, because one of the largest buyers in the United States government is the General Services Administration. And we are fortunate this morning to have joining us Ms. Crystal Broomfield. So Crystal, you've heard all about Japhus at this point. I'm curious, and I'll give a little bit of background on Ms. Broomfield. She's an attorney, accomplished corporate executive. She's spent a number of years with various organizations, but the two I'm going to highlight is AMAC, which focuses on minorities in aviation, and her role as the Associate Administrator for the Office of Government Policy at the General Services Administration. And I know you're going to share a little bit more about your background, Crystal. I'm excited to have you join us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for the opportunity to share about GSA and the work that we're doing in the Biden-Harris administration. I'll first start by kind of giving you an overview of GSA. Many people know about the agency, Scott, but I don't know if they really grasp the magnitude of the agency's buying power. So GSA is the government's centralized procurement and shared services arm. Just so you can get a glimpse into how big and powerful we are, I'll let you know that our real estate portfolio nationwide is nearly 370 million rentable square feet. We have we oversee approximately $75 billion annually in contracting obligations. And we also deliver a huge amount of technology services to millions of people across several different agencies. And so our mission is really to provide the best customer service and the best customer experience that we possibly can, both to our partners at other agencies and at the general public as well. In regards to bringing value related to real estate portfolio, our acquisition activity, as well as our technology services that we provide government-wide. But specifically about my office, the Office of Government-Wide Policy. The Office of Government-Wide Policy, which we like to use the acronym OGP. We coordinate across all government agencies and around the policy making activity within one central office. So I have about 220 people at any given time writing policy. That equates to only about 2% of GSA's workforce, but we have a huge amount of responsibility and activity. I have 7 different divisions providing subject matter expertise across acquisition policy, travel and transportation, federal property, including real property and personal property, federal high performance green buildings. We provide technology policy, and we also provide services and solutions for shared services and evaluations and behavioral science, as well as data analytics. And so we work very closely with OMB every day to make sure that we're advancing evidence-based policy, and that we're ensuring that the decisions that we made are grounded in the data that we collect. We manage also several government-wide councils: the CIO Council, the Chief Information Officer Council, the CFO Council, the CAO Council, the Made in America Council, and a host of other councils that we manage for the government. But the one that's probably the most familiar or the most of interest to this audience is the Federal Acquisition Regulation Council, the FAR Council, as many people understand it. Well, we write the FAR in collaboration with DoD and with NASA. And so we also run the website acquisition.gov, which is the source for acquisition regulations. I, in particular, Scott, at GSA, am designated as the Chief Acquisition Officer for the agency, which means I sit on the CAO Council. I also am an ex officio member of the Chief Information Officer Council. As you can imagine, information and data is important to us. But one of the roles that I'm most passionate about is the co-chairing the agency's equity team and writing the equity plan that we delivered to the White House last year and published publicly last year. I also sit on the White House's initiative for advancing educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity through HBCUs. I represent the agency there. And in a number of other capacities and roles, I'm proud to be a representative for the agency. But I'll also help you all kind of understand the interworkings of the agency, and let you know that we have roughly 1,700 1102s, our contracting officers. We have nearly 4,300 contracting officer representatives, and we have another 1,800 program managers, all collectively creating about a 9,000 person acquisition workforce. And I'm mentioning that, Scott, because my office, OGP, is responsible for training that workforce. In fact, not just training the workforce of the contracting officers and acquisition workforce at GSA, but government-wide, right? Hence the name. And so we do that through the Federal Acquisition Institute, Well, we provide regular education and training opportunities and certifications to individuals who are in the contracting space. And so we do a lot of that through online training, but also some in-person training as well. And then finally, I'll tell you that my office also includes the Office of the Ombudsman, which is an arm that really interacts and interfaces with the with the public. And so if there are any opportunities where you have some type of grievance or want to some type of frustration, then you can do that through the Office of Ombudsman at GSA, and that's specifically for GSA activity. And then finally, my office includes the Office of Suspension and Debarment, which is the office that you don't want to hear from. And that's the office where things get really, really bad. It comes to us and for review and for determination. And so that in a nutshell, Scott, is what I do every day. I manage the Office of Government-Wide Policy that includes all of these responsibilities and functions.
You've got a really, really big plate.
Yes. It's exciting and
wow.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but there are a couple of things that you touched on, and I think my internet is a little unstable, which doesn't normally happen. But there's a couple of things that you touched on that I wanted to address. Clients who are involved in clean technologies, right? Another is the Made in America Council. So
Sure.
You're really kind of in our ballpark. But if you'd like to elaborate on those two things, just briefly.
Sure. So I'll quickly touch on the climate and sustainability portfolio that we have, and that includes a number of things that it really is a new market for many businesses, especially small businesses, especially for minority businesses. So we're in the business of creating markets, right? And so part of that is recently GSA, we have had 2 initiatives around climate and sustainability that includes an acquisition component, because now we have to target our emissions, zero emissions for our federal buildings, right? We have a goal of 2045 by reaching that target, and we've already reduced emissions by 50% from the baseline. So we're excited about that accomplishment, but we have 50% more to go. We also have a really big goal of zero emission fleet by 2035. So that's going to create opportunities for EV charging and other infrastructure. But 2 things I'll point out really quickly is that GSA received $3.4 billion. In addition to all the money that we already spend annually, we received $3.4 billion to modernize 26 land ports of entries. 26 land ports of entries, whereby individuals, cars, trains, buses, whatever, coming into our country, exiting our country on our borders. And we have those 26 federal buildings. We have to make sure they're more sustainable going forward. And so that money is going to be spent on upgrading and modernizing those 26 facilities. The second thing that I'll point out is that specifically in the Inflation Reduction Act, GSA received another $250 million to convert our facilities to high-performing green buildings, and an additional $2.15 billion to use for low-carbon materials in the construction and altercation of those buildings. An additional $975 million for emerging and sustainable technologies for those federal buildings. And so we have some new money that we now have to spend rapidly, and we have some new requirements that are over and above what we are normally spending. And so this is creating a new market and a new opportunity for our small and minority businesses to really get into the federal marketplace, both on a prime level and also on a subcontracting level. And so there's just significant opportunities, and we want to work with your businesses and other small businesses across the country so that we can make sure that you all are successful.
Well, we want you to work with our businesses. So I have a question. Are
Sure.
there any particular components of the bill, these particular programs that are focused on minority business? And what are the entry points that our clients should be looking for to participate in some of the items that you just mentioned?
Well, the one thing that I'll point out is that the administration, President Biden last year, actually last June, during his speech at Tulsa, Oklahoma, made a huge commitment to the federal public that we would, as a government, in the aggregate, we would increase our share of contracts awarded to small disadvantaged businesses by 50% by 2025. So we're just a couple of years away from that goal. We have incrementally increased our contracting goal every year. In this past year, we increased our goal to 11%. We've met that number, and we're on track to meeting that 50% goal that the president announced last year. And so the opportunities, I would think, are tremendous, right? And I can't point to just one or two because there's so many that I can't name. I talked about earlier that we want fleet to be zero emission, right? And so we have to buy that fleet. GSA is the buyer for 1/3 of the fleet that the federal government owns and leases. 1/3 comes from DOD with their automobiles and their tanks. Another third the United States Postal Service has with their fleet. And then the third would be the General Services Administration fleet. So the infrastructure that has to go along with charging that fleet is going to have to be maintained, is going to have to be updated. So that's an entry point for businesses. And so I think the opportunities are endless. We just have to become aware of those opportunities and make contact and also take advantage of those opportunities. So I'm looking forward to talking about more of how to navigate the federal government so that our minority businesses can be a component of the marketplace and be a competitor in this space as well.
So I want to give, so let's hold off on that conversation.
Okay.
Because I want to give Mr. Christopher Hall an opportunity to talk about what's going on in DOD, specifically at the Defense Logistics Agency. And then we're going to bring you back and we're going to talk about navigating federal government.
Sure.
So Mr. Hall, are you ready to join us?
Hey, Scott.
Hey, how are you, sir?
Doing well.
Good. So I want to make sure I get your intro correct, Chris, and I'm looking for my notes. But Christopher Hall is with the Defense Logistics Agency. And the Defense Logistics Agency is one of the largest buyers of product inside of the Department of Defense. So Chris, I'd like for you to introduce yourself and then provide some additional background on DLA and your role at DLA and some encouraging words and recommendations for our attendees today.
Sure thing. All right. So again, Chris Hall, Deputy Director, Small Business Programs at DLA. And first, thanks for inviting DLA. Industry engagement is a major initiative at our agency. So I always appreciate the opportunity to interact with our industry partners at events like this one. So DLA is the Department of Defense's Logistics Combat Support Agency, providing worldwide logistics support to the military services, as well as several civilian agencies in foreign countries. And you said, Scott, one of the largest buying activities within DOD, but really we're one of the largest buying activities in the entire federal government. Of course, DOD is the largest agency in the federal government. DOD is the largest agency in in the federal government. Our DOD contracts, the broader DOD, writes something like 60%, 65% of all the federal contracts every year. And DLA is really right behind Army, Navy, and Air Force in terms of our contract spend. So you have Army, Navy, and Air Force, of course, write tons of contracts too. But to think of how DLA is different, right? So Army, Navy, Air Force, DOD generally write about 50% of their contract spend every year. About 50% of those contracts are for services, and about 50% of those contracts are for supplies. Right. So DLA is the exception, where about 95% of our contracts are purchasing supplies, and only about 5% of our contracts are purchasing services. And really, the services we purchase really are just to support DLA as an agency. We're a fairly large organization, 25 or so thousand employees, worldwide footprint, right? So we need all the regular services that any big organization needs, like auditors, facilities related services, and things like that. But really, our mission, right, is to buy supplies, right, consumable items on behalf of the department. So DLA sources and provides nearly 100% of the consumable items that our military forces need to operate. At DLA, we write about 10,000 contracts every day. So during fiscal year 2022, which just ended last month, so September 30th, DLA contracts with small businesses were worth more than $15 billion. So we have about 10,000 suppliers, and 80% of them are small businesses. So at DLA, our mission, right, we supply the Army, Navy, and Air Force with everything from food, fuel, energy, uniforms, medical supplies, construction material and equipment. We also supply most of the repair parts for all of DoD's trucks, ships, and aircraft, right? So we don't buy the jet or the tank or the ship, but we buy all of the parts to sustain that system over its life, which could last and usually does last decades. Right. And of course, DLA coordinates this effort for the department, but we rely on our industry partners to produce virtually everything that we subsequently push out to the military services. So that is, DLA acquires items from manufacturers and suppliers that we then provide to DoD and our other federal customers, often with supplementary services such as warehousing and packaging. So I say customers, so DLA's customers, right? So we are a support agency, and when we refer to our customers, we mean DoD, right? So the Army is our customer. The Army comes to DLA for food and fuel and uniforms, and similarly, Navy and Air Force are our customers, and DLA supports them by procuring all of these various supplies. DLA also contracts for items that are provided directly by our suppliers to DLA customers. For example, food and fuel for direct delivery to military installations. So at DLA, we manage over 5 million items that we've segmented into 8 supply chains managed by 6 major subordinate commands, or MSCs. So to understand what DLA does, it's useful for me to talk about the agency in terms of how we're organized. So that's what I'll go through just briefly in a couple minutes. So DLA supply chains that we manage, there's 8: medical, subsistence, clothing and textiles, construction and equipment, energy, aviation, land, and maritime. So briefly, I'll give you a rundown of the DLA major subordinate commands that support our supply chains. So into major subordinate commands, or MSC. So that's how DoD agencies are structured. And it's probably easier for you to think of that just as divisions or components of DLA. So the different.
Can you run through those again? I just want to make sure people heard them clearly. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to
Sure thing. And Scott, you're pretty. Hopefully, I'm coming through more loud and clear than you are. Can you hear me? Okay. So yeah, and I will. But so the supply chains, and I'm going to cover them in a bit more detail. But medical, subsistence, so food, right? Clothing and textiles, uniforms, construction and equipment, energy, so fuel, essentially, aviation, airplane parts, right? Helicopter parts, land and maritime. So briefly, I'll go into each of our, so that we have 4, and I was explaining the structure, right, of DLA, major subordinate commands. So I'll go over quickly the 4 major subordinate commands, or essentially divisions of DLA that manage the 8 supply chains. So DLA Troop Support, so that's our largest command, and they manage 4 of DLA's 8 supply chains. So DLA does about $40 billion in business each year, and about half of that is troop support contracts. So troop support supply chains are subsistence, clothing and textiles, construction and equipment, and medical. So troop support fulfills Army, Navy, and Air Force requirements for things such as food. So all the food, right, served in Army bases, that's bought by DLA. All the uniforms that Army wears, Navy wears, Air Force wears. DLA supplies and purchases all of that. Medical equipment and supplies. So DLA supports, in addition to like Army hospitals, DLA supports the VA and VA hospitals. Construction material. So we don't do construction at DLA, but we buy, one way to think of it, we buy all the material that would go into building something, right? HVAC, cement block, lighting systems, things like that. So all the material that the Army Corps of Engineers needs to build a building, DLA is buying that, right? Special operational equipment such as tactical and diving gear. So you can imagine all the supplies that a soldier carries around with them, right, from their uniform, but tactical gear, body armor, navigation equipment. The only exception being usually, right, weapons. DLA doesn't buy weapons. We generally don't buy ammunition, but everything else you can imagine a soldier carries around with them, DLA probably bought it and supplied it to, Army, Navy, Air Force. So that's DLA troop support in a nutshell. And they write contracts worth about $20 billion every year. And almost half of that at troop support are small business contracts, usually with manufacturers, dealers, or distributors of all those products. So aviation's primary mission is to procure repair parts for DoD aircraft. So these weapon systems include all the planes and helicopters owned by DoD components such as Army, Air Force and Navy primarily, right? Air Force and Navy are the folks that are flying planes for the department. Examples of what aviation buys: engine components, airframe, structural parts, flight safety equipment, electrical components, lighting, bearings, and cables. So that's DLA Aviation, several $1 billion worth of material every year. Like I mentioned, DLA Land and Maritime, they're co-located in Columbus, Ohio, but they manage, they're two supply chains, right? Land and maritime. So land, all the supply parts that DoD's trucks, tanks, land vehicles require. So things like maintenance kits, transmission, engines, suspension components, wheels and tires, the maritime supply chain. So they're buying all the repair parts to support Navy ships, for example, electrical parts, valves, pumps, motors. Last but not least, DLA Energy. So DLA Energy, as the name would suggest, provides energy products to the military services and other federal agencies. So energy manages primarily petroleum products, spending $8 to $10 billion a year buying, things like jet fuel, aviation and automotive gasoline, heating oil, lubricants, natural gas, electricity, renewable energy, and they're writing certain services contracts like energy savings performance contracts. So that in a nutshell is DLA. We support the entire DoD. Anything that you can imagine the DoD kind of uses up, right? We call it consumable items, but all the spare parts, all the food, all the fuel, all the clothing, uniforms, boots, anything that gets used and replenished, DLA is buying that on behalf of the department. And I'll turn it back to you, Scott. Hopefully we don't lose him.
Sorry about that. Having some technical challenges, Chris.
Sure thing.
So the big question, Chris, and thank you very much.
Sure.
And so that I don't use up my bandwidth, I'm going to keep my camera off for now. And so you're the feature. The big question, and I'll ask Crystal to join and I'll ask Japhus to rejoin. The real big question is, how do we navigate this? You both, Crystal and Chris, have talked about all of these wonderful opportunities that are presented. The question is, how do you access those opportunities, right? How do you navigate and get access to doing the energy related opportunities? Or if I'm a clothing manufacturer, how do I get in to sell clothing to DLA and the DoD? Crystal, how do I really get engaged with GSA, right? And you've got all of this square foot. So you're buying things for buildings, you're buying things for vehicles, as you say. How do we access all of these wonderful opportunities?
Sure. So if you want to take the first stab at that, Scott. So I guess two things I want to mention. First, procurement technical assistance program. So I don't know, folks on the line hopefully heard of that. Some of them maybe not, but procurement technical assistance program or procurement technical assistance center. So you might have heard the program referred to as PTAP or PTAC, right? So this is a program that was created to expand the number of businesses capable of participating in government contracts, right? So it's a program created by Congress, funded by taxpayer dollars. So most of what the PTACs, Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, would do for you as a small business owner is provided at no additional charge, right? Paid for with your tax dollars. And it's not just DLA contracts. Under the program, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers help businesses perform under contracts with the Department of Defense, other federal agencies, such as GSA, or as subcontractors on government prime contracts. So I'd say for starters, look up the PTACs. There's a PTAC in almost every state. We're here in Northern Virginia. George Mason University is the PTAC, so DLA has a agreement with the George Mason University to be the PTAC in Northern Virginia. If you're a business owner in Fairfax or McLean or anywhere else in the Northern Virginia area, right, you can go to the George Mason University and receive, free procurement technical assistance, right? Show you how to register, how do you look for opportunities and things like that. Across the river in Maryland, it's the University of Maryland. They're in College Park and various other locations throughout the state. So that's first half of my answer. Second half of my answer, so DLA, right? We have small business offices, the major subordinate commands that I mentioned that manage DLA contracts, manage DLA supply chains, right? So DLA rights, I mentioned 10,000 contracts every day. So that's overwhelming, right? We have small business offices located at each of our major subordinate commands, right? So we have folks sitting there at Land and Maritime in Columbus, or at Aviation in Richmond, or at Fort Belvoir at DLA Energy. And those folks will sit down with you and walk you through the process and talk you through how to pursue DLA as a customer, in addition to the PTACs being a great resource. And you can just, I think, Scott, you have the URL, but again, Google DLA small business, and you'll find our office. You'll find contact information for all those folks in the field. So I work for headquarters DLA small business, but when it comes to those, thousands, millions a year, right, of contracts that DLA writes, I really got to defer to our folks in the field because they have, the specialized knowledge to get in the weeds on some of that stuff. Of course, DLA has small business goals. We have goals for small disadvantaged businesses, women-owned small businesses, hub zone small businesses, all the other, all the programs that all the government agencies, right, have goals for small business. So that's really the two things that I would point out: PTACs, small business reps in the field at DLA.
Okay, and Crystal?
Yeah, no, I'll add where Scott was going. GSA also has a robust program to bring in small and minority businesses together with the federal government. So I just highly encourage everyone to just learn more about getting on the GSA multiple award schedule. As I mentioned before, we buy many things. We spend a lot of money at GSA through our various programs and pilots, but we also assist other agencies through our assisted acquisitions to also purchase and procure things that they need. And so we do a lot of that, or they do a lot of that through our schedules program. So get on the award schedule. We call it the MAS, the multiple award schedule. Our Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization can assist, or does assist, businesses in doing so. They have a lot of resources and advisors available to help businesses navigate what could be the maze of federal government contracting, and to also access those opportunities. So I just highly encourage everyone to reach out to the small business or the ASEBU office in the region that they're in. We help businesses outline the steps that they need to get on a contract. We help them understand how to market back to the federal government, as it is different than doing it from business to business. And we also help them understand how to submit offers to solicitations. And so we want to support small and minority and disadvantaged businesses from start to finish, and help businesses be successful in getting contracts and creating opportunities for growth. So we offer events throughout the year, both in person and in webinars, but we also have some resources online, and you can contact our office so that you can get some one-on-one assistance with with the small business office. The other opportunity that I'll point out is that we have forecasting tools that businesses can use that provide information on expected federal contracting opportunities, those that are coming up, so that you can prepare for them in advance. And so these tools can assist you in your acquisition planning so that vendors can really just know about what's coming up both on the prime contract level and on a subcontracting level. You can easily filter the data so that you can find the opportunities by your NAICS code or by the contract type, and the information is right there. GSA has an online tool, but also SBA has one as well. And so you can use these search tools to find solicitations, to find notices of sources sought, to also find out about the upcoming outreach events that most agencies have through their OSDBU organizations. These are just a couple of helpful tools to help you find the information that you need to navigate federal contracting.
You know what, you guys brought up a couple of things, and so I'll kind of elaborate on them. One is this idea of tools that are out there. If you go to the SBA website, as you suggested, Crystal, there are a number of databases that you will be able to figure out where and what agency is purchasing what items, and you can do that by NAICS codes. FPDS, which is FP as in Peter, D as in David, S as in Sam, is a good where spending is occurring within the federal government. So as people are listening to this, we do need to share those tools. The other thing that both of you mentioned is the OSDBU offices, the Office of Small Disadvantage and Business Utilization. Every agency has an OSDBU, right? Every department has an OSDBU. And those OSDBUs are there to be your advocates as minority businesses and to help you understand who is buying those things that you are selling. So we would encourage folks to participate with the OSDBU office. And then, Chris, thank you for mentioning the PTACs. Very useful procurement opportunity organization, right? Not only to help you identify, but to assist you in proposal development. As we look at this, one of the questions that comes out is, as a small business, how do I get started, right? Many of the things that you all have described, often it takes resources, right? And frequently you need to be of a certain scale to even take advantage of those resources. So if I'm really new, where do I go? And maybe I'll turn to Japhus and say, you know, how do you get started? When you first started, Japhus, where did you go first?
So when Juxtopia really first started, we started really with R&D. We need to figure out where we want to go as a company. Do we want to be, and I'm going to use other companies as analogies, Microsoft, and Amazon, Facebook, or do we want to do government contracting, and that's a great business, you know, but we wanted to develop products that were unique and innovative that may have not been done before to solve requirements in DoD or other type of needs and problems. And so the only vehicle that allowed us to do this without getting a family loan or going to get a loan from the bank is the SBIR and STTR process. It's the largest seed financing in the United States, non-debt, non-diluted. That's how we started. I encourage many companies, especially underrepresented minority companies, that can't ask Uncle Bob for $1 million for startup costs, to get that type of startup cost from the federal government, taxpayer money, of course, but it's utilized in the best way of creating very disruptive technologies that create a significant amount of jobs that for the federal government is a return on the investment of tax dollar revenue back to the federal government. So after the SBIR again, then it's utilizing DLA and GSA getting on the GSA schedule, because GSA administers all the phase 3 contracts for SBIR awardees. And DLA buys the type of products that warfighters need. And there's also the OTA, which hasn't really been discussed on this type of panel, the Other Transaction Authority, which is a $500 million ceiling, if I can recall. So that allows companies in the deal that are doing DoD work to come up with concepts and to actually get those concepts pretty much evaluated for future procurement. So the way we started with was, succinctly, is with an SBIR STTR.
So I can tell I'm getting that hook again with my internet. So Japhus, I want to be very tactical. Was your first stop to knock on a door? Was your first stop to send in a proposal unsolicited? What was your first stop? I want to be very tactical about that, so people understand. How do I engage?
So my very first stop was to determine the problem that Juxtopia wanted to solve. So in military medical personnel, first problem that we wanted to solve is to decrease battlefield mortalities across, theater and then how can military medical personnel assist casualties in tactical combat casualty care? So Chris, this probably resonates with you. So then we have to see, well, we're developing augmented reality already. We have an artificial intelligence software, what do we do with that? So first stop, after we develop the SBIR the technology through the SBIR program for DoD is, where do we go? How can we, get it procured? We found a DoD RIF. It was a contract mechanism called the Department of Defense Rapid Innovation Fund. It required a technical readiness level 3, which means that it's a prototype, but not yet commercial ready. And then to transition it to a technical readiness level 9 means that through this contractual mechanism, it had to go through this mechanism for commercialization. So we identified that contract vehicle called DoD RIF, Rapid Innovation Fund, submitted a proposal, got an award, and then executed. So succinctly, we had the SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grant. We had to find another mechanism, contract, so that we can build upon what we have already secured to satisfy the requirements of the military through contractual funding, so that can be procured, in this case, PO Stride.
So let me summarize. You found a need, you had a solution, you basically went out and knocked on the door, submitted a proposal, and received an award. And the point that I wanted to make is, going to Chris or to Crystal or to anyone else without having a clear understanding of what it is the government wants to buy is going to be a waste of your time.
Yeah.
Understand what it is that you're selling and who within the federal government is buying. Not everybody buys what you sell, but the government is big enough that I don't care what you're selling, somebody is probably buying it. So it's very important to identify who needs your widget.
Right. And Scott, the government gives indication as to what they're buying. In a lot of ways, of course, we get our dollars in large part from Congress, right? The executive branch gets their funding from the legislative branch. And so legislation will tell you what we're buying through the Inflation Reduction Act, where the money is going out to, through the infrastructure bill, who gets what pockets of money or buckets of money. That tells you where the priorities are, so businesses can follow that. Yeah, follow the money, right, to where it's flowing down to. So that's one way that you can that businesses can understand where the buying is headed towards. We also, I mentioned earlier, Made in America executive order. We're trying to buy more products in America, right? So there is an effort to have more of whatever your widget is, more of that component of that widget be made or sourced in the United States. So that's another indication of where the country and the buying activity is going. One of the first steps that businesses also have to do, Scott, is register on SAM.gov, that you can get feeds of information as to what opportunities are out there. But you first have to be registered on SAM.gov. You have to know what you're planning to sell to the government based off of what they're buying, not just what you're selling. But you may also want to consider getting some type of certification if it's going to be advantageous to you. And then the very last thing that I'll throw out there is you want to build relationships, right? Want to build relationships with individuals at agencies. I mentioned earlier, we have our contracting officers, we have our contracting officer representatives, we have our program managers. Start building relationships with the agencies that you're interested in selling to. And then finally, you want to build relationships with other businesses, because you may need to team together or partner together, or you may become a government subcontractor before you become a prime contractor. So you have to continue to build those relationships with individuals who are already working in the federal marketplace. So relationships are going to be key to entry and longevity within the federal space.
Crystal, thank you. That was a great wrap-up comment coming from Ms. Crystal Broomfield. I'm going to give Chris Hall an opportunity to do a brief wrap-up as well.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and a couple others hit on it, but yeah, subcontracts. Big opportunity in subcontracts, right? So DLA buys a lot, right? And we don't always buy things one at a time, right? And sometimes we'll have a contract, for example, that supports the platform or the weapon system in question, right? So DoD, other agencies have small business subcontracting goals for prime contracts. The DoD goal is something like 23% of all. So all of DoD's prime contracts, I think it's 22.5%, but 23% of all those dollars are supposed to go to contracts with small businesses. We also have a subcontracts goal, right? So out of all of our subcontract dollars, when those prime contractors are writing subcontracts, a certain amount of those dollars are supposed to go to small businesses, and that goal is about 10 points higher than our prime contracts goal. So there's tons of opportunity out there for small businesses, whether it's DLA, DoD, or other federal agencies as subcontractors. So don't overlook that. Some say the government isn't necessarily your easiest customer to get, right? We have a lot of rules. We do things certain ways. So subcontracts, if you're brand new, if you're brand new, a brand new business or brand new to government contracts generally, start with subcontracts. That's probably a good idea. Get some of that past performance, get some of that experience, dealing with the department as a contractor. And there's exceptions to that, right? But generally speaking, that's probably going to be an easier nut to crack, the subcontracts than the prime contracts as your first step. To wrap it up for DLA, right? So our small business folks are a big resource. Our website is a good resource. You can find a calendar on our website. We do events like this with kind of third-party organizations, and I again appreciate the invite to this one, but we also put on webinars every month to reach out to the small business community, and we'll have folks from our major subordinate command. So those folks with great knowledge about our requirements and the ways to get into DLA business, participate in that. So find our website, DLA Small Business Calendar. Search DLA Small Business Calendar in Google, and it'll probably pop up as a second or third on your list, right? Find our calendar, register for a webinar, and our folks are there to help you. That's what the small business office does, right? So don't hesitate to do that. Reach out to our small business folks. Reach out to the PTACs, right? And good luck in doing that.
All right. So we're coming up on the hour, but I do want to do one thing. There are a couple of questions, and I think we've answered most of them. One was from a small business wondering how do we get into government contracting, particularly if you don't have any past performance. But we talked about some of the organizations that could help along with the PTAC. And you can always reach out to the MBDA Advanced Manufacturing Center. There was a question about mentoring programs. And so I want to do a rapid fire. Several government agencies have what they call the Mentor Protege Program. So for those who are interested in doing work in DoD, the Army, the Air Force, I believe now the Navy, and JISA all have mentor protege programs. So you should look at that. The SBA has a mentor protege program. And there was one last question about what trends do you see for maritime contracts? So I'm going to ask, since we're running out of time, I'm going to ask perhaps Crystal, if you could share some additional information that you might see, and Christopher, that you might see. If you could share it with me, I will put that out to all of the attendees. Japhus, I can give you an opportunity, real quick, 30 seconds, your advice, your closing remarks and advice.
Yes. Best seed funding in the United States, SBIR, STTR, not Shark Tank. If you need help on writing proposals, go to the Juxtopia Urban Innovation and Cooperative Entrepreneurship at juicenetwork.org. If you want to become a multi-billionaire, it's product companies. And the best way of doing that, commercially and with the government, is your what we call the SBIRs and STTRs. Very much a proponent of it. That's how it started. That's how we still rock and roll. And the juicenetwork.org is here to help write full proposals, connect with HBCUs and minority serving institutions, and helping you to become successful in improving your human performance.
Thank you all so much. I want to just summarize. This was a great session. Hopefully people will be coming back to look at the replay, because there was so much information that you all gave out on this short hour that I'm sure they're going to need to listen to the replay just to catch up with all of it. I will say, once again, the government is, as I understand it, the largest procurer of products and services on the planet. If you're not doing business with the government, then you're losing out on an opportunity. Not only the federal government, but state and local government as well. Often as minority manufacturers, we are in the business of providing consumer goods directly to consumers, and we don't think about the idea that DoD has markets for their military personnel all over the world, and you can sell your consumer goods through there. We don't think about the GSA and the fact that they have all of these buildings and they're building roads, and so they're laying asphalt. They are, they need cabinets for buildings. They need all of the things that many of our clients are manufacturing. There are opportunities in government to sell. So I would encourage folks after the session to go back and take a look and figure out where you fit in. I want to thank our panelists today for once again providing a ton of information that was going to take us a while to cipher through. We put some links in the chat. We put some notes in the chat. I'm asking our panelists to also share with us some additional information, and we'll send that out to all of our attendees today. This has been MiHUB Monday, October 24th. Please look for our announcement for our November MiHUB session. And if you have any questions about the MiHUB Cooperative, please reach out to info@mihubcoop.com, or you can reach me directly at nsphillips@baltimorembda.com. My name is Scott Phillips. This has been MiHUB Monday for October. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.